are you? You can sit right in the middle. I think it'll be a good balance. Sorry. I printed out the questions if you'd like your copy. Sometimes I just like to find something.
What a gathering of eagles.
All right, I think we are ready to begin. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. This is our last parish forum in this series. So thank you for being great participants, just a beautiful audience, and also being a part of this storytelling process too. It's been great to learn about this parish and the history from the panelists and also from all of you. So thank you for these past weeks. It's been really lovely. To start off, I will have both of my esteemed panelists state their name and their position in St. Peter's governance, as well as what originally brought them to St. Peter's Church.
So my name is Suzanne Loranc, and I am the parish council president. I started on parish council back in September of 2017, I believe. So, and then I became president. This is my second year as president.
Hi, I'm Ed Wagner. Currently, I have been on the Administration and Finance Committee with Administration and Finance Cabinet, rather, which was an amalgam of a couple of committees, including Finance and Property, which I also was on prior to that. I've been here like forever. So.
Born here. You're born here.
Where do I start? Anyway, that's probably enough for now.
Thank you. And so my next question for both of you is, how did each of you decide to serve St. Peter's Church in each of these roles of governance? Suzanne, maybe if you would like to start.
Yeah, I decided to join parish council partly. I like to be part of things whenever I'm part of an organization. It's just a natural thing for me. Plus, at that point, my husband and I had just started our family, so we wanted to be, part of the decision-making process for a congregation that we were going to raise our kids in. And then, as far as becoming president, that was not exactly something I sought, but something that Jared discussed with me, and it seemed like a great idea after we had our discussion. And I also come from a long line of parish council presidents, so it just seemed in the cards for me.
Kind of as I mentioned, I've been here for a long time, so I started here. I grew up in Queens, not active in church as a young adult, and then I met Carolyn, who has been here at St. Peter's since she was a child, and so it kind of became part of the marriage contract, right, to be here, but not actually. I liked it when I got here. Having been away from church for a while, I liked the service, I liked the music, I liked the liturgy, I liked the fact that there was a jazz ministry here. I liked the fact that there was a lot of outreach to the community, which had started a while before that, a deliberate reaching out to the community and extending the ministry beyond just the worshiping congregation. So, since I was interested, I guess I got a little attention anyway, so I said, well, what do you do? Well, I'm an engineer, and I do technical stuff and planning and finance and so on. I said, well, we've got places where you might be helpful. And so it was. And so, I've been on a number of different committees. I've been had a few cycles on parish council, being president of the council here and there, and here I am now. And I'll mention this a little more later about the Midtown Arts Common, now the Arts and Architecture Conservancy at St. Peter's. But when that was formed during the organization, the planning and the organization of the St. Peter's in the 70s, I was also recruited to be on that. And so I've been on that for quite a while, and currently chair the board.
And some of us can remember when Ed and his group used to come to Easter Vigil in black tie.
Oh, a black tie Easter vigil.
Yes, very nice.
Awesome. Thank you. So Suzanne, this was going to be for you and Andres, but the both of you are parish council members as well as on the executive committee. Can you reflect on the differences between those two groups and the members that are part of each, as well as the different conversations that happen?
Yeah, so and I'm looking at this audience, I'm pretty sure most of you have served on parish council at one point or the other. So you probably already have some familiarity. But parish council, we really focus on setting the policy for St. Peter's. Making sure that the policies align with our charter and or our constitution, and also align with just what we believe as Lutherans. And from there, those policies are taken and instituted by the different task forces and cabinets that help run the day-to-day of St. Peter's. So that's really, we are trying to keep at a higher level to keep the, church focused in the direction it should be focused in, without getting into too much of the details, so that all of the cabinets, the staff, can run the church as needed. Then to be part of the executive committee, it's all chosen from those within the parish council. We always choose them right after our congregational meeting at the end of the year. So that will be coming up soon. And let's see, the different conversations that happen. Well, within the executive committee, we really focus on setting the agenda for the parish council. So we have it open. Anyone who wants to put an agenda item in front of the parish council can reach out to us and send us a note. Either people within the parish council, just people from among the congregation. We're open to any of those. And then actually Andres has this very important role that we've kind of worked out where he looks at things that are submitted to us to consider putting on the council agenda, and we kind of make a decision. Is this something that can already be handled by a cabinet or a task force, or is this something that we really should consider as policy? Excuse me. And then from there, once that decision is made, we bring it to the whole executive committee, and then the executive committee then decides whether or not it goes, excuse me, I'm getting over bronchitis. So then we decide whether or not it goes in front of the entire parish council.
Thanks, Suzanne. Could you also explain a little bit, I know Andres is also in charge of the committee for Fabian's sabbatical. Can you touch briefly on kind of how that came about?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that while Father Fabian was away, that the Misa community and the community that really relies on Fabian has the opportunity to kind of consider what church life is in his absence. that is basically just some space for everyone to consider what are the things that he really is a part of, what are the things that they need to be more a part of, things like that. It's just kind of a space to think about how that community within our congregation functions, and how they worship, how they are involved in ministry outside of the church. And I think that's important. I think those are nice spaces that every congregation should have. A lot of times you get them whenever you have an outgoing pastor before you have a new call. But I think the sabbatical time is kind of a good place to take that opportunity. So Andres is going to be leading that and just making sure that the conversations are being had, that there are people still reaching out to the MISA community to see about needs and just what they're thinking with this space. And that group is led by Andres, and the whole council considered who would be in that group. So that's their directive, and we'll see how things go over the next 3 months.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Jacqueline. So Ed, I will kind of shift the conversation towards other parts of St. Peter's governance. That when I was talking with Jared as we were kind of beginning to think of what questions to ask, he started to explain to me that St. Peter's had originally had kind of 3 distinct parts in its original vision, with St. Peter's Church, the St. Peter's Trust, and the Commons, focused on non-religious arts and cultural programming. The Commons specifically has gone through a lot of different changes and transitions over the years. And can you explain some of these changes and what is currently happening now?
The earlier church complex that was on this site, the 1908 building, and there was a parish house and there was a parsonage in between. But back then, in the 60s and even before, there was, as I mentioned, an intentional, deliberate decision that the church needed to reach out beyond just the worshiping community and to involve the community, the larger community, and to be involved. And so it did that. And so even in the old building, which wasn't designed for these functions, we had the church basement, kind of a space that was used sort of like this is used, and that became an art gallery as well, an exhibition space. And so there was visual art exhibitions that were posted there from time to time. The original church had a bowling alley for the members, and the bowling alley wasn't used much anymore, and so that was converted into a theater. And so there were interesting semi-professional theater productions that were put on in there in the former bowling alley. And so that kind of triggered, while the planning was going on for after that complex was demolished and this new complex was built, what are we going to put in the space? How are we going to use it? And so intentionally, there were spaces designed that would allow for that same kind of activity, reaching out to the community, reaching out to the performing arts community, reaching out to the visual arts community in all of its varied forms, supporting the jazz community in terms of being cognizant of audio-visual systems and so on, spaces. That was a complex and kind of a real challenge for the congregation as it was planning. Well, what should the governance structure then be for the St. Peter's that would follow then after the new building is built, this building is built. And the idea of the three-legged stool for financial support was thought of quite thoroughly. And so there was the idea of the worshiping community, the congregation, members of the congregation who would support the church and the liturgical and the worshiping activities, not only by their presence but by their contributions and stewardship. There was a concern that if we needed to make sure that things were going to preserved and continue on. There needed to be a longevity, not year-to-year budget planning as the end of the financial planning. And that gave rise to the idea of an isolated, somewhat isolated from the congregation, a trust, which would be essentially the endowment for the institution, but it would have some protections built in. So there's a trust indenture that has procedures as to how those monies are to be received and invested and used. And that would give people confidence that there is longevity to this institution, and would be willing to, even if they're not members, would be willing to, or if they are members also, to give money to that institution as opposed to week-to-week, year-to-year stewardship giving. And so the trust was created. It's not separately incorporated, but there is the indenture, and there are the procedures, and if significant actions are taken, they need to be controlled by the entire congregation, not just the parish council, who might be under, local, early, immediate financial issues. And then there was the realization that the outreach and the programs that we had developed and hoped to expand in the new facility with the arts, primarily music, jazz, classical music, all kinds of music, the performing arts, theater, dance, those kinds of things, and the visual arts also to support those activities that they're hopefully and likely were many in the larger community who would support that, who would be reluctant to give, to write a check to a religious organization, the church itself or the trust. And so the concept of the common arose. And the common was an interesting word that was used there because that's a term that goes back to Old English communities where there was an area in town that belonged to everybody, and it was kind of the marketplace. It probably goes back even a lot earlier than that to ancient Greece. And so the Commons was added into the name, and it was originally called the Common at the Intersection, because this is the intersection of the larger community. The name was changed later on to the Midtown Arts Common. And so that's separately incorporated. There's a separate board of directors that elects itself. It's not controlled by the congregation, although most of the members of the board are members of St. Peter's, and so we have that level of control indirectly, if you will. And so originally, when the complex was completed and programming began here, the theater was a large focus of the Common. To support the theater, there was a staff person who was paid to manage the theater. That morphed over time into the partnership with York Theater, so they would manage it. And attention moved more towards the visual arts, supporting the visual arts program, and also various music programs, specifically the classical concerts that some of those were supported by the Midtown Arts Common, and midday jazz, which was very popular before the pandemic knocked that out of the box. And more recently, with the effort on the conservation of the Nettleton Chapel, the Midtown Arts Common has served as a function where people could give a contribution to the Midtown Arts Common, and then the Midtown Arts Common would give a grant to St. Peter's to support the conservation work in the Nettleton Chapel. And so that's the model that we're looking forward going into the future. As Pastor Stoller mentioned, the board has just changed the name of the organization to the Arts and Architecture Conservancy at St. Peter's. And so we'll see a focus now, hopefully a very successful focus, on acknowledging that St. Peter's as a total entity, certainly the sanctuary and even the building itself and the way the spaces are laid out and the design of the interior spaces needs conservation and is a community asset. It serves, we know, much more than just the worshiping community that's here. And so we think that it will be a very attractive proposition that we could make to many in the outside community beyond the congregation, as well as within the congregation, that here is an organization that's stable, that has a board of directors, that's separately incorporated, and you can give a contribution to not only programming for the arts, which will continue, of course, but also for conservation of the important features of this building, and certainly the restoration of the building. And so that's what we look forward to going forward.
Thank you, Ed. I saw a hand up, so I'll pass this on to Ace.
Ed, thank you. You've explained a lot of the history on the programs at St. Peter's, but primarily in terms of the arts and architecture. One of the things that I think is striking about St. Peter's is it has so many outreach programs that also are just for those in need, social programs. And when we started coming here, and Marty and I started coming here in the 80s, we were struck. This is a church that's not just about itself, but it's reaching out to help New Yorkers in need. Momentum, breakfast feeding program, programs for the elderly. Can you touch on when did those take life? And they lasted for a long time. Some of them have gone away, but can you just give us that color, please?
And hopefully are coming back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those are coming back, but if you really want to spend a long afternoon, I can tell you about some of the early social outreach programs that St. Peter's had. I was active in a program called Adopt a Building. I won't go into the details, but so that's not new, but you're right. Momentum, supporting people with HIV and AIDS, the breakfast feeding program, the homeless, and so on. And so there might be others. One of the attributes and vision, if you will, of the people who wrote the original bylaws and the original certificate of incorporation of the Common wrote that so broadly that the Common can do almost anything. And so it certainly could. One of the other dimensions was just doing lectures and forums and discussions on ethics and life in the city, and maybe even a little forums for political discussions. So we haven't done that. That would be possible, but you're right. I think as the detailed outreach material for the fundraising drive, which we'll hear more about at the congregational meeting, the Arts and Architecture Conservancy will be part of that, and however that could be useful to support those programs. But it wouldn't be prohibited under its current charter.
So it keeps that kind of correct.
Yeah, I see Dorothy's hand up, so I'll pass this off to you.
Just in piggybacking on what you just said, I'm curious as to the old name, Midtown Arts Common. It incorporated a lot of other things. It seems now changing the name makes it even more exclusive, at least when you hear the name. Was there a reason for that? Like not incorporating, Momentum is a separate 501c3. Anyway, that became independent. But like the breakfast program or other things like that. When you say architecture and so forth, in my mind, it limits the outreach of that group.
We actually sort of expanded the sense of Midtown Arts Common seemed to focus to us as only on the arts. We wanted to recognize that the architecture of this building also needs conservation. The programming is implied within. I mean, everything that happens within this complex is within the architecture, if you will. And so, you know, you can't have a name that's a title of an organization that's 10 words long. And so there was a fair amount of active discussion among the board as to what would be a good name. But we certainly wanted to expand that to include the idea of conservation of the architecture as well, because of the usefulness of the Midtown Arts Common as a separate, non-profit corporation that people can give to and not give to a religious organization, that they could give to that in the hopes of getting contributions towards the rebuilding of the church.
So where would something like the breakfast program fit?
Well, that was never part of the common.
It was not part of the common, and I think we'd have to have a discussion about that and whether it's useful or appropriate to have it within the Arts and Architecture Conservancy, or whether that's better left within the structure of the worshiping congregation, St. Peter's, or maybe another structure, another organization yet to be defined. As you mentioned, Momentum is a separate corporation that we're in partnership with. It's not our program directly, but it happens here.
It's right.
I was gonna say, the breakfast program is very, very much dependent on New York Cares, which is a separate, organization, because I would say probably 4/5 of the volunteers at least were non-members of St. Peter's, and they came to us through New York Cares. So that wherever it comes to rest here, we need to continue that partnership with them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments so far? Since we have a smaller panel, there's some more time for group discussion. Dennis?
I should probably know the answer to this, but anyway, I'll ask. What's the future about any kind of theater here? I suppose that was part of the redesign, but I didn't pay too much attention. And if it, and/or how would that fit into the new Arts and Architecture Conservancy?
Yeah, Bruce has provided legal services for the issues related to the theater.
The plans over there call for the theater to be restored to its original black box configuration, which is no permanent seating, no permanent stage, very flexible, a very modern, avant-garde type thing. And the capacity would be reduced to about 120 people. And both of those things make it highly unlikely that the York Theater is going to be able to come back because they need seats and they need a larger capacity. And I think the intention right now is to keep it available for different organizations to use, either on short-term or medium-term basis, so that it isn't. York Theater had an actual lease or license for over 30 years, and they were the only ones that had the use of the theater. And yet it sat empty for long stretches of the year without being used for anything. So that's where it's headed. I hope that answers the question, but hopefully they'll be able to get different theater groups or organizations to come and say, we want to come use it for 2 months, to do this project, or this kind of thing. But I don't think it's going to be a permanent home of a theater company again.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other comments or questions at the moment? All right. So one of the final questions that I have for Ed and Suzanne is, why is good governance important for a church? Both of you would like to reflect on that question. Suzanne, maybe you could go.
It's interesting, when I first really started getting to know the parish council and then becoming part of the executive committee, I was actually fascinated by how great of a governance structure had been set up at St. Peter's. I started off in a very small congregation in West Texas, and basically everyone traded positions on the church council every year. And then different people had what they wanted to be involved in. So it's really interesting to have gotten to know St. Peter's governance structure and seeing how it can keep an organization like this so focused on both the congregation and then what we do for others. And I think that's the importance, is making sure that we make this congregation sustainable. I constantly make jokes about when my daughter will be church council or parish council president. And that's the hope, is that we are making this congregation sustainable so that we can pass it down through the generations. But also making sure that today, in the moment, we are focused on our mission and our ministry, and focused on not just how we can help people within our church, but how we can help people without of our church. So I think it's extremely important to have good governance, obviously for any organization, but especially for ours, to set it up in the way that's proper and responsive.
Yeah, I would just add, going back beyond the Arts and Architecture Conservancy now, but just experience here at St. Peter's and really elsewhere. I mean, you have to have organization. You have to make sure that there's a long-range vision and a long-range future. There needs to be an understanding of the mission, and to keep the organization on track so it stays within its mission. You need to develop budgets, and you need to stay within the budgets. All of that is part of governance, and it's not, there are many people, right brain and left brain people and so on, so there are a lot of people who are not attracted to that kind of work. And there are others who are, fortunately, Suzanne. So it's critical. So it's kind of behind the scenes. You have to make sure the boiler keeps working right and the lights stay on because the bills are paid. So that's what governance is. And if it's not your thing, that's fine. You can focus on individual programs and individual activities and put your energy and your creativity into that. But there also needs to be a group and a structure that keeps everything together, that keeps communication flowing, to make sure that people are talking to each other within the congregation and other stakeholders who may not be within the congregation necessarily.
Thank you. I see Ace's hand is up. I will pass the mic to you.
A very short question, a very difficult question. This is a dilemma. Is the trust fund an ends or a means? And how do we keep those separate and balanced?
I think it can be both, frankly. Like, I think that it, there is both the need to have the trust, and that is an ends, but there's the use of the trust, and that is a means. And I know that those on the trust committee really put a lot of time and thoughtfulness into that. We meet with them once a year, the parish council, to hear what's going on, to get the report and know how the trust is functioning and how it can continue to support St. Peter's ministry. So, and I, even just certain things like the trust recently, and John, you can probably speak to this better than I can, really made sure that we were thinking about how we were investing our money, not just to gain money, but to also make sure that we were morally responsible in what we were investing. And that was an important policy change that came through from the trust to the executive committee and then to the council to vote on. So I think that it is both. I think that we have the right people on the trust committee to balance that, and I think we just need to continue to make sure that those who are on that committee are always keeping the balance of supporting us financially, but also supporting our mission and doing it in a way that complies with our mission.
Can you tell us approximately how much is in the trust right now, not counting the buildings?
John, 10.4 million.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
For some reason, I always think it's 12. I have positive thinking, apparently.
Well, 10 is great.
Awesome, thank you.
When I was at council, it was like-
John, do you want to add anything? Okay, no, that's fine. All right, are there any other comments, questions before?
Is the COVID task force retired now? Is it over?
It's still going. We
What
haven't.
it doing?
Well, there's still needs to serve in, the community responsive to COVID, and frankly, I mean, I know that I don't see anyone in a mask, right? And that's probably just a couple of months since that, but it's still out there, and we still have communities within this congregation that are very vulnerable to it. And maybe it morphs into something that is more responsive to any situation like this, but right now, no, it's not been retired.
I guess we've always had 3 congregational meetings a year for as long as I've been around anyway. But it seems the masses have less and less information from the council and the executive committee. Is there any way, I know there once was a newsletter, we're over that period, we're into electronics. Is there any way, whether we haven't seen like any financial reports in I don't know how long, and some of the other groups, the committees have been, a lot of committees have been disbanded, but new groups, commissions and things like Ed and so on, have been formed. But we don't get any information coming out of it to the masses of the congregation. So is there any way that could be maybe some short minutes or reports on the website? And also the financial reports periodically being distributed.
And the names of the members of the council could be on the website. That would be very helpful. I have
And
no
I know
idea who's on the
at
council.
one point, a couple couple of years ago, I think it was John asked to put the Constitution on the website, but that was never done. So could that be done?
So, first of all, we have had financial reports. And right now we are going through an audit, and you'll receive a financial report toward the end of the year. Also on kind of reaching out, we've been relying a lot on email. And so a lot of the information that you would find out from council is included in those emails, whether it directly says it's from council or not. It just becomes part of the, overall communications that come from St. Peter's. And then, sorry, I'm just thinking through all of what you had discussed. So if we need to discuss other ways that we can, reach out to people, certainly open to that. But I would just say definitely, and I know people look at those emails because we get the response reports, and we've also done a communications audit fairly recently to consider how best to communicate to everyone. And it also depends on the community at St. Peter's. Everyone in the 1030 service tend to look at those emails and be responsive to those emails. But within certain communities, we have to do a lot of outreach through WhatsApp, which, people in this room may not even know exactly what that is. It's all, which is not enough. We all use communications in different ways. So I would just say, if you have specific ideas on what needs to be communicated and how, it's not just a discussion with us, but it's also a discussion with the staff and how best that can be accommodated with them. And then as far as the Constitution, I thought that was, go ahead, John.
There is, as far as I know, if you go to the website, there's no link to it, but if you Google on the site for a Constitution, you can find it. So it's on the website, but it's not directly linked to it.
Right. So that's a question of fixing the link.
How does anybody know?
Hi, I do the website at St. Peter's. My name is Jacqueline Lewis. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications, and I can link the Constitution if I run it by Pastor Stoller. I can link it tomorrow under Parish Life on the right side.
And can you put the continuing resolutions up there as well, so we have a complete picture of the governance?
Yeah, absolutely. I can talk about it internally and link more of those. So a lot of the stuff has to do with the parish, like you guys will be under Parish Life, which is community, and then it's the second tab down. The parish council's on there at the bottom of staff. You have to scroll down. So it's like the leadership page, you go and it has our staff, and then it has our counselors, and then it has the names of the parish council. But yeah, if you want to, you can talk to me about what you would like to see on the website. It's getting kind of a little bit of a facelift, so I'm very open to suggestions.
It might be good when we first went electronic way back.
Love that.
We had a meeting like this, and somebody went through the whole website and showed us what was there and how to reach it and so forth. Some people are more adept at doing it than others.
Yeah.
Maybe it's about time, since we have so many changes, that we do something like that again.
Yeah, and also our financial reports and strategic plans, I'm working on like getting all of those together because they do like strategic plans every year, so stuff like that, making that more accessible.
Thank you. All right, I think we are just at time. So I would love to give a round of applause to this panel, but also to all of you. Thank you so much for engaging in this great discussion. Thank you for joining us for these panels. It's been a great time thinking about how we celebrate what is at St. Peter's and also the new life that continues to flourish in this place. So yeah, I would invite you to come to the June 24th meeting. Great. Ace, do you have one final thing?
This is a great practice. We should extend this in the future.
Yes. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Erin.